A big hello to all of my students. Now I've come with a competency which is given in your curriculum. It is PY 10.5. Describe and discuss structure and functions of reticular activating system, autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system you have already studied in previous lectures. So today I'll be discussing mainly the reticular activating system in this lecture. Now, what are the learning objectives for this session? As we keep on repeating that, and at the end of the session, you should be able to uh, first of all describe the organization of brainstem reticular formation. That is how the brainstem reticular formation is organized. Its different components. Secondly, you should be able to enumerate and explain the different reticular nuclei correctly. There are multiple reticular nuclei already, although it's a non-specific, but still you should be able to name some and explain them clearly. Then next objective is that after going through this session, you should be able to differentiate between the facilitatory and inhibitory reticular formation, where they are located, how do they function, and how do they differ from each other. Then next objective is that you should be able to trace the pathway of medial and lateral reticular spinal tracts, which are the descending pathways. These are one of the descending pathways. So we'll be studying other descending pathways in subsequent classes. So you should be exactly able to trace the pathway, that from where do they start, how do they go, and how do they terminate, and at what neurons they terminate. Next objective is that you should be able to identify the components of reticular activating system, that is what structures form the reticular activating system. Then after this you should be able to explain the functions of reticular activating system, cite about abnormalities also, then outline the afferent and efferent connections of reticular formation. Finally, after you have gone through this, in the end you should be able to summarize the functions of reticular formation. So I'll try my level best to explain that what is reticular formation. So there is sort of superimposition of different objectives. So while going through this lecture, you try to make yourself clear that what are the different objectives you should know. So try to understand first the objectives and then go through the lecture. A very important question is that why you want to study reticular formation. What is the role of reticular formation in your day-to-day activities? Let us keep a focus on this important proverb, like thoughts becomes things. Choose the good ones. Once again, I want to repeat, thoughts become things. Choose the good ones. This was said by Mike Dooley. So we'll come to this. First, reticular formation. Reticular formation is a very important component of your brain, of your central nervous system. It has multiple roles to play, like your tone. We studied the stretch reflex, we studied the different reflexes. So it has a part to play in the maintenance of tone. Different postural reflexes, so modulating the functions of those gamma neurons, alpha neurons. Then your sensory control on certain sensations. When you feel certain thing, again the role of reticular formation. Different cardiac centers, respiratory centers, they are located here. Then control of different autonomic functions, modification of autonomic functions, the visceral functions. Again, the reticular formation plays a role. Your modulation of pain. Now, a very important component of reticular formation, the reticular activating system, or what we call RAS, or this is a very important part of reticular formation. Although we will be talking of reticular formation a whole, but this, especially this component, along with its reticular core, reticular formation is also called as reticular core. Along with this, it has a huge role to play in your life. So it sort of acts as a gatekeeper. It acts a mental filter. It is placed at the base of our brain. So what is it? It's a cluster of neurons with interconnected network of connections. Now, why I'm saying it's a mental filter? If you observe daily, we are constantly being bombarded with tons and tons of information from our environment, different factors. Is it easy for you to focus on all or imbibe all? No. It is difficult for us to respond to each and every stimuli. So, who comes to our rescue? This reticular activating system component of reticular formation. How does it do this? What does it do? It brings to our attention the things which we consider are important, which we tell it that they are important, so focus on only those. But very important thing is that this itself cannot tell us the difference between the real and the virtual or the imagined. According to it, they are one and the same. It only tells us what you tell it. So it is a part of subconscious level. So the subconscious, our subconscious is basically due to reticular activating system an important component. There are other components also. We will be discussing it shortly. Let us take an example. When you are afraid of something, you create reasons in your subconscious mind. These reasons will be created by your subconscious mind to continue to create situations in your life in which you feel anxious or fearful. So there is a situation, you feel fearful, you tell your mind that I fear this. Then your subconscious level, of which the reticular activating system is also a component, it keeps on telling you that this is something which you should fear. So you have already told your subconscious mind to fear it. So it is telling you to keep on fearing it. So, but important thing is it works both ways. If you keep on focusing the positives and take into notice only the things for which you should be grateful, you will continue to notice that the good around you, and then what will? You will filter the bad. So it is you who is going to realize it that this is good and this is bad. So keep on repeating and then it will keep on bombarding you back that this is important or not. This is this is a sort of philosophy or psychology, but it is based on the scientific reasons, and scientific reason is your subconscious part, of which contributor is reticular activating system. In nutshell, you become what you focus on. It grows what you pay attention to. Here comes the role of positive affirmations and writing in a gratitude journal. So that is why most of the time you go to some spiritual gurus or some like centers that tell you to go repeat the positive affirmations. So what does this positive affirmations do? They ingrain in your mind the positivity of certain aspects. Like we say, I am good, I'm the best, I can do it. So you keep on repeating those things. I can do it. So keep on repeating. I can do it. There is nothing bad around. I am the best. I am capable of doing. So sort of different affirmations, or you make a diary, you keep on repeating good things and you keep on reading them and repeating them. So basically you are the ones who makes it real based on your belief. So the virtual things can be made real depending upon your belief, and it helps you create whatever you desire. So it is always there to help you. That I said again, repeat, to help you create whatever you desire. So why not use it to your advantage? So feed it positive thoughts rather than the negative ones. So before going to the physical components of reticular formation, so I wanted to give you certain spiritual outlook of the reticular formations. I think I am clear. So let's move on to the reticular formation. Before going to reticular formation, let's talk a little bit about the brainstem. Brainstem, this brainstem, you can see here, it connects the cerebrum to the spinal cord. It is made up of medulla, pons and midbrain. It modifies the basic function of the spinal cord, like it help maintain the posture and position of the body. Most of the centers, vital centers, are present in your brainstem. Apart from specific motor nuclei or specific motor and sensory neurons, there are diffuse collection of non-specific nuclei uh, which are there as internecine fibers scattered throughout the brainstem. They are scattered throughout the brainstem, and they are responsible for non-specific activities. So they are called non-specific nuclei. They are called as reticular formation. We can say that brainstem is the extension of spinal cord into the cranial cavity, because it contains the motor and sensory nuclei that perform the motor and sensory functions of the face and head regions, just like the anterior and posterior gray horns of the spinal cord. So almost same. So face and head regions, motor neurons are present here. So it can perform same function from the neck down. Also, it provides many special control functions such as those of respiration, cardiovascular system, gastrointestinal tract, for maintaining your equilibrium, control of your eye movements, control of many stereotype movement of body. So the brainstem serves as an instrument of higher neural control centers that basically funnel or transmit many command signals into the brainstem to initiate or modify the brainstem's specific function. So basically it is a conduit between the spinal cord and the cerebrum, and its functions are being modified by the cerebrum or the higher centers, and it is also modifying the centers of the spinal cord, the lower centers. Reticular formation, what is it? It is a diffuse, that is widespread collection of neurons and network of nerve fibers of non-specific nuclei. That is, they are not specific, non-specific nuclei. Phylogenetically, it is old reticular core of the brain. So we call it as old reticular core of the brain. It's a complex network of brainstem nuclear neurons. So these brainstem nuclear neurons, they form a complex, the reticulum. That is why we gave the name reticular formation, the reticulum sort of meshwork of this. The role is that they are responsible for a major integration and relay center for many brain vital systems to coordinate functions which are necessary for your survival. The reticular formation does not contain distinct boundaries, and there are many nuclei included in it do not have a precise delineation of territory. That is, you do not delineate between territory, rather their territories merge together. So you cannot distinctly say that this spreads to this. It occupies the mid of the ventral portions of the medulla, pons and the midbrain. So all the ventral portions, mid of the ventral portions of the brainstem are being occupied by the reticular formation. Let's start with the structure of reticular formation. In your anatomy classes, you are going to study in detail the major anatomy of the reticular formation, but we will here focusing ourselves on the physiological anatomy of reticular formation. So very important component of reticular formation are the reticular nuclei. I told you they are non-specific nuclei. So these non-specific nuclei, they are arranged in three longitudinal columns in the brainstem. We can see from here to the midbrain there are three longitudinal columns. We can see the different colors. See the different colors, they have used different colors to tell you about different type of reticular formation. Now we have three column of nuclei. When they are placed in the midline, they are called as median column nuclei. Mostly the nuclei of median column nuclei are called as raphe nuclei because they are form a strip of nuclei in the midline. Collectively they are called as raphe nuclei. Then we have the medial column nuclei. Medial column means just medial to the midline. They are medial to the midline. So here they are the magnocellular or the gigantocellular. Magno means the nuclei here are large. Here they are slightly smaller than the medial one. So we have the larger nuclei here. The larger nuclei, they are arranged in the column just medial to the midline. So they are called as medial column nuclei. Then the third is the lateral column nuclei, or what we called as parvocellular nuclei. So these nuclei are the smallest. They are arranged most laterally. We can say the parvo term is used, parvocellular. We will be discussing this in detail. Then these was about the nuclei. So now the nuclei, they need to have certain efferents and certain efferents. So again, the efferents and efferents, they are divided into two. We have ascending reticular formation, what we call as RAS or reticular activating system, and then we have the descending reticular formation. Descending reticular formation basically goes from these nuclei downwards to the spinal cord. It is again of two types: facilitatory reticular formation, which will facilitate or stimulate something, or inhibitory reticular formation, which is going to inhibit something. Apart from specific motor and sensory neurons in the brainstem, as we have told that we have certain non-specific nuclei. In this non-specific nuclei, we do not include the specific group of cell bodies of neurons that form the cranial nerves. That is, the cranial nerve nuclei are not included in this. The motor and sensory nuclei and relay nuclei for ascending and descending tracts are not included, like the medial lemniscal system for posterior column tracts. So let's discuss here the median column nuclei. The median column nuclei are also called as raphe nuclei. Why they are called as raphe nuclei? Because raphe means a line or a ridge that separates two symmetrical parts of your body. So here we are using it for a collection of nuclei which are clustered around the midline. Their intermediate size between the medial and the lateral nuclei. Now the rostral group, that is the upper group, has Mainly the serotonergic neurons. So mainly it contains serotonergic neurons which project to brain, especially the diencephalon part, cerebral cortex, especially the limbic system, and also they go down to the spinal cord. These median group of nuclei, their main function is to modulate the actions of neurons which are involved in motor responses, pain, autonomic functions, sleep, mood elevation and arousal. The functions collectively we will be discussing in subsequent slides. So what are different Raphe nuclei or the medial nuclei? They are multiple. We'll be focusing on some important. So there is the rostral group or the upper group and the caudal group. In the caudal group, we have this nucleus Raphe obscurus or Raphe obscurus nucleus. Then we have Raphe pallidus nucleus, this Raphe pallidus nucleus, then Raphe magnus nucleus. So Raphe obscurus, Raphe pallidus and Raphe magnus nuclei. Then we have in the caudal aspect different nuclei. One of the important are dorsal Raphe nucleus, dorsal mesencephalic nucleus and the median Raphe nucleus of the median nuclei. So here we have the important the caudal and the rostral groups, and mainly the rostral group, they are serotonergic, that is they release serotonin at the terminal. Here the medial column nuclei, now they lie medial to the median column of nuclei, and they consist of the larger nuclei, and so they are called as magnocellular nuclei. The important one are nucleus gigantocellularis, nucleus reticularis pontis, caudalis and oralis, cuneiform nuclei and subcuneiform nuclei. These nuclei basically are important to modulate the motor responses and posture, pain sensation, autonomic functions and arousal. So they are larger than the median nuclei as well as the lateral nuclei. So they belong to magnocellular group. These medial nuclei or the gigantocellular neurons, collectively I'm talking, they are source of most of the long ascending and descending projections of the reticular formation. That is, they form mostly the efferent tracts of reticular formation. Most of, not all. Fibers from gigantocellular neurons, the giant cells, they divide into two branches immediately, one going to the brain up and the other passing down to the spinal cord through the reticular spinal tracts. Then the neurohormone or the neurotransmitter released by these is an excitatory neurotransmitter, which is acetylcholine. So at most of the places, activation of these cholinergic neurons lead to an acutely awake and excited state. So they play an important role in your aroused awake conscious. That is, coming to the last column of nuclei, the lateral column nuclei. There are multiple nuclei in this. I will be talking of few. So we have the parvocellular, they are the smaller neurons, parvocellular reticular area. Then we have the nucleus retroambiguous, medial and lateral, parabrachial, medial and lateral, parabrachial nuclei present in the upper portions. Then we have the ventricular collicular fused nuclei, what we called as pneumotaxic center, which plays a role in respiratory center control. Then we have the locus ceruleus and the area subceruleus, and many more nuclei are involved in this. The lateral group are the smaller group of neurons. As I was mentioning earlier, that these lateral column of nuclei, they are made up of smaller neurons. These neurons lie close to the motor nuclei of the cranial nerves, which lie in the brainstem, and they modulate the functions of these cranial nerve nuclei also. So they control mainly the respiratory functions, as we have discussed the pneumotaxic center also. So mainly the expiration part in the respiration. They also help coordinate autonomic reflexes and simple behavior which are mediated by these cranial nerve nuclei. A very important nuclei, which is the locus coeruleus, it is a smaller area which is located bilaterally and posteriorly at the junction between the pons and midbrain. Nerve fibers from here, they spread throughout the brain. Generally, they secrete the excitatory neurotransmitter norepinephrine, which has an excitatory role in the brain, but it may have some inhibitory effects in few brain areas. The inhibitory role is important in causing dreaming and the rapid eye movement sleep, or what we call as the REM sleep. The descending reticular formation, as we discussed, that the lower part, the descending reticular formation, which sends fibers to low down also, and it has two types: facilitatory reticular formation and inhibitory reticular formation. The facilitatory, the name itself suggests that it facilitates, it stimulates or excites, it helps potentiate something. Facilitatory reticular formation. Facilitatory reticular formation is spread throughout the brainstem, but anatomically mainly the part which is located in the pons and midbrain, the pontine reticular formation, and some also extend into the brain, are considered the facilitatory reticular formation. Located slightly posteriorly, and laterally in the pons and extending into the midbrain or mesencephalon. The neurons of the pontine reticular formation or the pontine reticular system, they have inbuilt intrinsic excitability, that is, they are self-excitatory, they can generate their rhythm. The fibers from this pontine reticular formation, or the what we called as facilitated reticular formation, they send fibers down on what we called as the medial or pontine reticulospinal tract. Mainly the nuclei of pons, the nuclei reticularis pontis caudalis and oralis, they form the, from here the fibers go down, descend into the spinal cord as the medial or the pontine reticulospinal tract. The efferents in this pontine reticular formation, it receives efferents from the vestibular nuclei, deep nuclei of cerebellum, vestibular nuclei here, and then deep nuclei of cerebellum, red nucleus, and also it receives collaterals, that is the branches from sensory ascending tracts. The tracts, when they ascend in the brainstem, they give fibers to this facilitatory reticular formation, like spinothalamic tracts, then the other posterior column other tracts, and also the auditory, visual, olfactory and taste pathways. So it also coordinates the function of these systems. It also receives collaterals from the descending motor tracts, like the corticospinal tracts are going down, they are sending the corticoreticular fibers into the facilitatory reticular formation, and also fibers from the hypothalamus, they also go to the facilitatory reticular formation. So in nutshell, both the facilitatory and inhibitory, they receive fibers. So we'll be concentrating here on the facilitatory. So it receives fibers from different nuclei. Again repeat, the vestibular nuclei, the deep nuclei of cerebellum, the cerebral cortex as the and the red nucleus. We'll be studying what are these what is red nucleus. Then the collaterals also going down as corticospinal fibers. They give on the way while going down, they give fibers, the cortico-reticular fibers, and the fibers while coming up going to the higher up brain or to the thalamus or to the cerebral cortex, and also the auditory, visual, olfactory and taste pathways which you have already studied. They also give the side branches to the facilitatory reticular formation and also hypothalamus. So there is sort of amalgam of this impulses coming from the higher centers as well as the lower centers. I already told you that the fibers from this facilitatory reticular formation or the pontine reticular formation and also part from the midbrain, they descend as the medial or the pontine reticulospinal tract from the nucleus pontis, oralis and caudalis. Mainly they descend in the anterior horn of the spinal cord uncrossed. Termination is in the laminae 7 and 8 of spinal cord. They terminate in interneurons. From the interneurons, then they modulate the function of the spinal motor neurons, mainly the gamma motor neurons. So these, the name itself guides you that this will facilitate. So here what is it facilitating? It is facilitating the spinal motor neurons, mainly the gamma motor neurons. And we have already studied that gamma motor neurons are responsible for maintaining the tone in the stretch reflex. So whenever there is stimulation to the gamma motor neurons, there is increased activity of these motor neurons. What will it do? It will lead to increased sensitivity and activity of muscle spindle. Muscle spindle. So when activity of muscle spindle will be increased, what will happen? It will lead to enhanced or stimulated stretch reflex. This enhanced stretch reflex will lead to increase in the tone of the muscles. And which muscles? This pontine reticulospinal tract mainly increases the tone in the extensor muscles or the anti-gravity muscles to maintain, and axial muscles to maintain the posture. So I again repeat that the fibers, they go from facilitatory reticular formation or the pontine reticular formation as the medial or the pontine reticulospinal tract, terminate in the laminae 7 and 8 of the spinal cord through the interneurons, via the interneurons. See, we can see here interneurons, mainly the going to the spinal motor neurons, mainly the anterior motor neurons, the gamma motor neurons. They facilitate them, they keep them excited or stimulate them. So when they are stimulated, they will lead to activation of increased sensitivity of muscle spindle. If you remember muscle spindle, when they activated, it will lead to stretch of the central polar region. It will enhance the stretch reflex. That is the signals through the annulospiral endings will go on increasing, go to the extraphyseal muscle fibers, and they will contract. So there is increase in the muscle tone, that is partial state of contraction at rest. We are here, it will do mainly in the extensor, which has the anti-gravity muscles or the axial muscles, leading to the maintenance of posture. So this is responsible for tone and the posture. Now coming to the inhibitory reticular formation. So it's opposite to the facilitatory, that is inhibitory reticular formation. This inhibitory reticular formation forms that part of the nuclei which lie mainly in the medulla. So these are all those nuclei we were discussing. So these nuclei, they are lie in the medulla. So they form collectively now medullary reticular system. We are not differentiating between them, the medial or the median or the lateral. We are just differentiating based on the position, that is where they are placed here, there and their function. So placed in the medullary, so we call them as medullary reticular formation. They extend throughout the entire medulla, lying ventrally and medially near the midline in the medulla. Difference between the medullary and the pontine reticular formation is that as the pontine reticular formation has the self-excitation or the intrinsic activity, these medullary reticular system do not have an intrinsic activity, and they send their efferents via the lateral or the medullary reticulospinal tract, generally from the gigantocellular nuclei. Generally the gigantocellular nuclei. Again, make myself clear that we are saying that medial and lateral, this medullary and the pontine reticular formation, basically these are those nuclei only which we were discussing, the medial and the lateral. We were discussing that time how they are placed as a column, but here we are discussing in terms of their function, that is either they are facilitatory or inhibitory, and they contribute to the descending tract. So they are the descending, they contribute to the descending tracts. So they lead to two tracts, these the median and lateral reticulospinal tracts. The afferents to this reticular formation, the inhibitory reticular formation, or what we call mainly the medullary reticular formation, it also receives collaterals from the corticospinal tracts, the corticoreticular, and it also corticoreticular fibers, and also receives fibers from the rubrospinal tract, that is from the red nucleus again. Then the other motor pathways, especially the premotor cortex or the area 6, or what we called as suppressor area, the premotor cortex, same like the uh, lateral medial reticular formation, also receives fibers from the basal ganglia and the anterior lobe of the cerebellum. Almost all the collaterals are same as the facilitatory reticular formation. Now the course of lateral reticular formation or the medullary reticulospinal tract is, it also descends uncrossed, while some fibers may cross in spinal cord to the lateral horn. Here they are like lateral horn medial to lateral corticospinal tract. We can see here this lateral reticulospinal tract, it lies medial to the lateral corticospinal tract and the rubrospinal tracts. It is lying medial to, this is a cut section of the spinal cord. Here we are the descending tracts. See, this is the lateral reticulospinal tract lying medial to the lateral corticospinal tract and rubrospinal tract. Here we can see that the medial reticulospinal tract lies in the anterior horn, and it lies posterior to the anterior corticospinal tract and also the vestibulospinal tract and the tectospinal tract. Here the lateral reticulospinal tract terminate on the interneurons in the laminae 7, 8 and 9 of the spinal cord. Now here they act opposite to the medial reticulospinal tract. Medial reticulospinal tract was stimulatory to spinal motor neurons, that is the gamma motor neurons. But here they are inhibitory to gamma motor neurons, leading to decreased activity of gamma motor neurons, causing the decreased sensitivity and activity of muscle spindle, inhibiting the stretch reflex and decreasing the muscle tone, mainly in the extensors or the anti-gravity muscles or the axial muscle of for the posture. I again repeat that they function altogether opposite to the facilitated reticular formation. Facilitated reticular formation was causing the increased sensitivity of the muscle spindle, leading to the increased tone in extensor muscle, while they are decreasing the sensitivity of muscle spindle, decreasing the tone in the extensor. They work exactly opposite to each other. Functions of reticulospinal tracts, we say they can cause control of movements and maintenance of muscle tone. A very important aspect of these two is that is medullary and pontine reticular formation. They function antagonistically to each other. If we see the effect of pontine nuclei on anti-gravity muscles, it is excitatory, and medullary it is inhibitory. These pontine nuclei facilitate the control of voluntary and reflex movements, while medullary they inhibit it. Pontine nuclei control the facilitate muscle tone, while medullary nuclei inhibit it. Pontine nuclei lead to vasoconstriction and medullary nuclear vasodilatation. See, they work almost antagonistically with each other, and the other functions are that they convey autonomic information from higher centers to the spinal cord and thus play a role in regulation of respiration, circulation and sweating. Very important thing about these two reticular formation is that normally the reticulospinal tract they cause a counter effect. How? The medullary reticular formation, this is activated mainly by the premotor cortex, what we call as suppressor area, the basal ganglia, anterior lobe of cerebellum, to cause the inhibition, that is to counterbalance the excitatory signals from the pontine reticular system. But then signals from the other part of the cerebral cortex, the red nucleus and the cerebral pathways, then disinhibit the medullary system when your brain wishes to for excitation of the pontine system, or you need to stand. Or at other times, excitation of medullary reticular system can inhibit the anti-gravity muscles in certain portions of the body to allow those portions to perform other motor activities which would be otherwise impossible if the anti-gravity muscles oppose the necessary movement. So they sort of work together. Hence, these two constitute a controllable system that is manipulated by the motor signals from the cortex and elsewhere to provide the necessary muscle contraction for standing against gravity and to also inhibit appropriate group of muscles whenever they are needed to perform other functions as required. So, at some moment certain muscles of your body need to have a different tone. So this is being controlled by the balance between the two, that is the pontine reticular formation and the medullary reticular formation via the reticulospinal tracts. Now coming to the second important part is ascending reticular formation. We discussed the descending part, the lower portion of the reticular formation. Then this is generally called as reticular activating system or ascending reticular activating system. Our wakefulness is dependent on the reticular activating system, as I was discussing in the beginning. More active this system, more alert a person is. It is because of this system that a person is aware of himself and his surroundings. That is, you are aware of yourself and your surroundings. This conscious alert state of your mind makes other perceptions possible. That is, this reticular activating system causes facilitation so that other sensations can be perceived when your cerebral cortex is in a facilitated state. So when you are awake only, then only you can feel a sensation. I touch you when you are sleeping, you may not be aware of it. I give a pinprick very bold, then some you may aware, but then you need a background alertness to perceive anything. So this is the function of reticular activating system. It is made up of complex polysynaptic pathway. It is a complex polysynaptic pathway It is made up of intertwining network of neurons which are present in the upper pons and the midbrain. Upper pons and the midbrain, also known as bulboreticular facilitatory area. It projects anteriorly to the hypothalamus to mediate behavior, as well as posteriorly to the thalamus and then directly to the cortex for activation of awake desynchronized cortical EEG patterns. It is considered as one of the most important systems which facilitate the functioning of sensation and your attention. As I told you, it's also called as bulboreticular facilitatory area. Its efferents, or it receives collaterals from long ascending sensory tracts. It receives collaterals from long ascending sensory tracts. Especially the fibers, major contributor is the fibers of which carry slow pain. Also the fibers collaterals from trigeminal, auditory, visual and olfactory pathways, and also cortico-reticular fibers from the descending corticospinal tracts. So same efferents which we were discussing while discussing the facilitatory reticular or inhibitory reticular formation, the same fibers which contribute to this. So important is that the complexity of the neuronal network and the degree of convergence in it abolishes the modality specific. So most of these neurons are activated with equal facility for different sensory stimuli. So there is no preponderance of one particular stimuli leading to the stimulation of the neurons in a higher manner. So there is equal stimulation of neurons by the different sensations because of this convergence of the neurons. We have discussing the fibers which go downward. We discussed what is the descending tracts. Now the efferents, especially from the magnocellular part, magnocellular nuclei, they go to thalamus. From the thalamus, most of the signals, they go to the thalamus here, and then from the thalamus they go to the cerebral cortex and especially the limbic system, and some they directly pass without relaying in the thalamus to the cerebral cortex. These thalamic signals, so again repeat, see the signals, they ascend and they go to the thalamus. From the thalamus they go to widespread, see the widespread area of the cerebral cortex, especially the limbic system. See, they pass diffusely to whole of the cerebral cortex. Some pass directly without relaying in the thalamus. Now talking about the thalamic signals, these thalamic signals, they are of two types. The signals which pass by the thalamus are of two types. First is the one type is rapidly transmitted action potentials that excite the cerebrum for only a few milliseconds. It's a short-lived excitation. Especially these arise from larger neuronal cell bodies like the magnocellular part. Their nerve endings, they release acetylcholine. So it's a excitatory neurotransmitter. So the excitation from these neurons, it is short-lived, just destroyed after a few milliseconds. I again repeat, a burst of impulses, they go from this ascending reticular formation via the thalamus to immediately, very rapidly, fast conducting fibers, because they are larger, they conduct very fast, and the thalamus, it is excited and it sends excited signals to the cerebral cortex. But this is very short lived. After a few milliseconds it dies and this is excitatory. As we know, here the neurotransmitter released is acetylcholine, which is most of the time excitatory. The second type of fibers which go to the thalamus arise from the smaller neurons, and because they arise from the smaller neurons, they are slowly conducting, coming from the large number of neurons which spread throughout the reticular activating excitatory area. So most of this pass to the thalamus, especially to the intralaminar, midline, periventricular and reticular thalamic nuclei. From here, the fibers are relayed via the non-specific generalized thalamocortical projections to layer 1 and 2 of cerebral cortex. When we will be studying the cerebral cortex, we'll come to know the different layers of cerebral cortex, especially they go to the superficial layers. The superficial layers are layer 1 and 2. So they control the long-term background excitability of the brain. So especially the electrical activity of the cerebral cortex leading to alertness and arousal. What I mean to say is that they have these thalamocortical projections, they have an excitatory effect on the cerebral cortex, and it occurs for a longer time. It maintains a background excitation of the cerebral cortex, and this is responsible for your alertness and arousal. So whenever there is stimulation of a reticular activating system, it causes partial depolarization of dendrites of cortical neurons on which this impulses end. So as a result of this, the cortical neurons are facilitated, that is, their neuronal activity is increased. So because of this, the cortical neurons, they remain in excited state, which is responsible or necessary for your wakeful state. I again repeat, these reticular activating system keep your cerebral cortical neurons in an excitable state, so which is necessary for your perceiving different sensations and day-to-day activity. And these are kept activated by impulses coming from the ascending pathways, from sensory projections, the medial lemniscal system, the lateral lemniscal systems, all those ascending pathways which we discussed, all the ascending tracts, and also the impulses from the higher up centers, from the cortico-spinal tracts as corticonuclear tracts. So continuously the impulses while going up via the ascending tract, they keep on stimulating the reticular formation, and the impulses coming from up going down to the spinal cord, they keep them in an active tonic state. So in this way, the cerebral cortex is kept in a excited. Now let us sum together the functions of reticular activating system. We have been discussing the functions side by side also. So I'll be repeating this, that it leads to strong facilitatory drive to cerebral cortex, leading to increasing background excitability of these neurons and increasing their responsiveness to specific nuclei, causing the wakefulness and alertness. I make myself clear. Reticular activating system gives a strong facilitatory drive to the cerebral cortex, increasing their background excitability, increasing their responsiveness to specific nuclei or different functions, and leading to wakefulness and alertness. So the subject is conscious, alert, which is very necessary even for a proper sense perception. So an alert person is fully aware of senses. So whenever reticular activating system is inhibited, what will happen? You will not be alert, and what you will do? You are going to sleep. So for your alertness, I am repeating again and again, the responsible component is reticular activating systems. Now beside this, it also causes responsible for selective attention and sensory intention. That is, you respond to certain stimuli and are inattentive to certain stimuli, what I was discussing in the beginning. So how does it occur? We talked of that. And how does this occur? How you become attentive to certain components and inattentive to certain sensory components. It occurs because of the filtering of stimuli by the noradrenergic neurons of the reticular core through the centrifugal sensory pathways. All those pathways. So filtering occurs by these noradrenergic neurons of the central core. Secondly, because of the habituation of the reticular neurons. What do you mean by habituation? Habituation is basically the simple form of learning. It helps you in learning, in which a neutral stimulus, when you are repeating many times a neutral stimulus, you get habituated to that particular stimulus. That is, you become habitual to that particular thing. Same applies here also. Initially, when a novel stimulus is given, novel means new, not the novel coronavirus. So new stimulus is given, it will evoke a reaction. That what is it? Orienting reaction, that what is it? As you keep on continuously giving that stimulus, what will happen? It will keep on evoking less and less of electrical response as there is decrease in calcium release in the sensory endings. Finally, what will happen? The subject becomes habituated to the stimulus and ignores it. Thus, though the brain is receiving that sensory information from all the senses, it is capable of ignoring information that is of no consequence. This results from inhibition of the synaptic pathway for that particular type of information, and that is called as habituation. And this in sense is a type of negative memory. Now, opposite to habituation is sensitization. It is in sense is opposite reaction. If it is a positive memory, for those types of incoming information that will cause pain or pleasure, the brain has the automatic capability of enhancing and storing these memory traces. So this results from facilitation of the synaptic pathway, and there is prolongation of action potential with resultant increase in intracellular calcium. These are special areas in the basal limbic region of the brain that will determine whether information is important or not, making your subconscious decisions whether to store the thought as an enhanced memory trace or to suppress it. So, your general nature of thought, as I told you in my initial lectures, is determined by your subconscious level, and the subconscious is contributed by the reticular formation, reticular activating system, the limbic system and the thalamus, and the cerebral cortex gives it a discrete pattern. So the reticular activating system this way can help you in giving a positive response to a stimulus or a negative response to a stimulus. So you have to tell it by causing either habituation or sensitization. Now we have to keep it in mind that the thalamic neurons, which these reticular activating system or the sending reticular formation is sending impulses, itself has the intrinsic capability of spontaneous neuronal activity which is approximately at the rate of 8 to 13 impulses per second. So at their own level, they are also sending thalamocortical projections to the cerebral cortex, but they keep in a sort of excitable state. The cerebral cortex is also kept in the excited state. So they are responsible for the alpha rhythm of the EEG. We'll be discussing EEG also in the subsequent lectures. So it has different rhythms, alpha, beta, etc. I'll not go in detail now. So these thalamocortical projections on their own are responsible for alpha rhythm. They keep in a partial excited state of the cerebral cortex. But when these impulses are reinforced by a reticular activating system, the intrinsic uh, intrinsic rate of firing of thalamic neurons is added over or reinforced by the reticular activating system. So this leads to overall increase in the excitability, leading to the beta rhythm of EEG. Beta rhythm is a awake, conscious, awake state. We'll be discussing those rhythms and you'll come to know that different type of your mental states gives rise to different types of EEG rhythm. So it increases the excitability of the neurons. So this is also one of the functions of the reticular activating system. And how this the reticular activating system is being controlled. We already discussed the impulses coming to the reticular activating system, the impulses coming from the ascending tracts and ascending tracts. So the central core, that is the reticular formation and the reticular activating system, this is being affected by the corticofugal impulses. All these impulses, facilitatory impulses coming from the cerebral cortex and inhibitory from the limbic cortex. They are being influenced from the ascending and descending tracts, and then mainly the facilitatory from the cerebral cortex and inhibitory from the limbic cortex, and also the specific inhibitory impulses from the raphe neurons. Raphe neurons, if you remember, the serotonergic neurons, and these raphe neurons, they release serotonin, and the serotonergic neurons mainly, they cause the drive of the reticular activating system and intrinsic thalamic activity to be reduced, and thus the EEG characteristics what we see will be the setting of the sleep. What I mean to say is that the specific inhibitory influence of the raphe neurons to the reticular activating system and the intrinsic thalamic activities to decrease their activity. And when their activity is decreased, the awake conscious state is opposed and you tend to sleep. I'll give you a small aspect about the applied component of reticular activating system. Suppose if you experimentally induce lesions of reticular activating system in an animal or in a human also, that we see that there is at least through induction of sleep or coma. So, or what we do in humans, we there is any tumor or there is any vessel blockade or trauma at the level of upper brainstem above the point where bilaterally the fifth cranial nerve enters. This fifth in the level of pons. So this fifth cranial nerve is the highest nerve that transmits significant number of somatosensory signals into the brain. So what will it lead to? It will lead to loss of all the sensory signals, and the level of activity in the excitatory area diminishes abruptly, and the brain proceeds instantaneously to great reduced activity, or that is, we approach a state of coma. If the brainstem is transected below the fifth nerve, leaving much of the input of sensory signals from the facial and oral region to reach the brain, this coma may be averted. That is, either there is a trauma to the reticular activating system by a tumor, by a vessel blockade, or you interrupt the signals from the lower centers, then it can lead to induction of coma or sleep. So also, when in a sleeping animal you stimulate this area, it will cause arousal phenomena, that is, makes the animal wake up. Then it has been seen that the agents which produce sedation, hypnosis or anesthesia, like the drugs, barbiturates or the benzodiazepines, how do they act? They act by preventing synaptic transmission of impulses in reticular activating system and thus inhibiting the reticular activating system. So you have to remember that you are awake, alert, because of the activity of reticular activating system continuously going on. Now, separately we were trying to study the functions of reticular activating system. So I was saying that we have been discussing the functions of reticulospinal tracts and reticular activating system. Now collectively we'll discuss the functions together. So summarize in the form of collectively the functions of reticular formation. So first of all, important is that your reticular formation is important for your sleep wakefulness. It is a neural substrate of your consciousness, and it's responsible for sleep waking cycle. Especially it has been seen that the median, the rapid nuclei, they are responsible for your wakefulness, and almost it has been seen that they're completely inactive during the REM sleep. And mainly the activity in it has been said that activity in the rapid nuclei, especially the dorsal raphe and the median raphe nuclei, is also believed to influence the circadian rhythm through communications with the suprachiasmatic nuclei. So we'll be discussing more when we discuss sleep, so in depth we'll be going there also. Then another important function is your selective attention and sensory attention, that we said that this is also important function of reticular formation, and through its corticofugal control of sensory input, and also due to habituation, and this performs this function. And also your mood and emotional state are also depicted by are also favored by the reticular formation. Then conditioning and learning. Reticular formation is again a very important part when you'll be studying learning. You'll again come back to reticular formation, because earlier also I have been repeating again and again, when you are awake, when you are alert, you are able to learn better. So we'll going more detail when we discuss learning. Then control of motor activities and regulation of posture. Through the reticulospinal tract, it influences the tone and then the different postural reflexes. Then another is pain analgesia system. So it modulates, we have discussed the pain analgesia system, the brain stimulated analgesia, how the raphe nuclei especially, they descend in the spinal cord and they lead to the pain. They affect the transmission of pain impulses through the substantia gelatinosa of the spinal cord. So they sort of modulate the pain, and I'll not go into detail. We have already discussed this. Another important function of reticular formation is the autonomic functions. So this autonomic functions you have already studied, the autonomic nervous system. So hypothalamus is a very important component of autonomic nervous system, is the major gland, autonomic gland we can say. So the via this it controls different visceral functions via its connection with the hypothalamus. So it can mainly the vomiting, swallowing reflexes, they are integrated in medullary reticular formation, and whatever the control of higher centers at the hypothalamic centers, they to the lower autonomic centers, it is being mediated by the reticular formation. Then control of cardiovascular centers, the vasomotor centers located in the medullary reticular formation, it controls your heart rate, cardiac output, and vascular tone. It plays a major role in the regulation of blood pressure. We have studied that in the cardiovascular system. This has cardioinhibitory centers which inhibits your heart and also plays role in control of blood pressure. Then control of respiratory centers. The inspiratory and expiratory group of neurons, they are located in the central gigantocellular nucleus in the medulla, and also we have the pneumotaxic and apneustic centers are located in the pontine reticular formations, and these respiratory centers, they play a major role in control of the respiration, especially the expiratory part also. Then the neuroendocrine control, the reticular formation plays a role in the control of neuroendocrine and endocrine control of hypothalamus. So because hypothalamus, it is both endocrine organ and the part of the central nervous system. So this action of hypothalamus is mediated via the, some actions are mediated by the reticular formation. With this we finished the reticular topic of reticular formation. While in the subsequent lectures, when we touch the thalamus and we talk of sleep, we talk of learning, we talk of eye movements or the controlled eye movements, again the reticular formation will keep coming in picture. So this is a background information of reticular formation to learn the further or we go in depth into the central nervous system. Bye, good night, goodbye, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you listen, it's bye. Thank you, till the next time.